The logistics business is around taking care of our clients' goods.
Making sure we do that efficiently as possible.
But obviously it's a lot more complex than that.
Pharmaceuticals in general, they even have a bigger requirement in terms of energy, so they are big polluters as well.
Wheels turn, that requires energy again.
Whatever mode of transport's been used, massive amounts of carbon are being emitted into the atmosphere.
Effectively in South Africa, a lot of those energy demands are met with fossil fuels.
The way that we're consuming the resources of Earth, by 2030, we're going to need the equivalent of 2 planets worth of resources. Where are we going to get the second planet? And Mars is not going to work. What's even worse, by 2050, we're going to need the equivalent of 3 planets. Our CEO is really, really passionate about it. And as a result of that, we've put really stringent targets.
So DSV wants to achieve a 40% reduction in Scope 1 and 2 emissions by 2030 and 30% of what we call Scope 3 targets.
Scope 1 is basically the emissions from the diesel emitted by our own trucks. Scope 2 is the emissions from the electricity that we use in our buildings. And Scope 3 is the emissions from our air and sea operations. So we don't have direct control over that. We've got direct control over Scope 1. We've got not 100% direct control over Scope 2 because it's electricity, but we can influence it by using less electricity.
The starting point was to look at contributing to the targets from the Paris Agreement, actually. And DSV has broken that down into some elements that we can impact.
Fortunately, there's lots that can be done. I mean, just in solutions, we've identified 33 projects globally that can be done to some or other degree in almost every single country that will reduce carbon footprint.
What Science Based Targets has done is they said, how can we actually measure that, convert that activity that you're doing into a carbon emission? You don't want to be known to be greenwashing. So what something like a science-based targets will do is they give you a reliable platform. They actually audit what we're doing. So you want to partner with these companies that can actually audit and with credibility say that you're actually doing something for the environment and it's not just greenwashing.
So if we can minimize the kilometers we travel, we minimize the fuel, we minimize the impact.
If you are more efficient in terms of eliminating excess, whether it's distance, optimizing loads on vehicles or even an airliner.
With one of our clients, we went and we did a proof of concept. We brought in 2 vehicles that we use for our deliveries that we do in and around Gauteng. Put in chargers here, linked to our solar that we produce on the roof. So in terms of the carbon emission saving, it was just thousands of kilograms that we actually saved in terms of that. And the client has now decided they're going to order another 77 of that vehicles. The next step as well is we need to get to the bigger trucks. So the first thing you do is you look at where's the biggest drivers of carbon emissions. And the first thing I found is one of the biggest drivers is buildings. And then in the top 9, 2 of them is in South Africa. If you have 10 points where you actually need to go and store product before it reaches the end client, you're actually just adding to the footprint. So one of our strategies has been to bring business units together under the same building. The other advantage that you have once you do that is that you can actually develop, design, build the building to have, call it a zero impact on the environment.
With that as well, now we've got the, let's call it the air conditioning plant, and we've got all those associated, is how do we generate heat in the winter and how do we generate cooling in the summer itself. And then if you go to the sorter itself, the crossdock, did we choose a sorter which craves energy or did we choose one that actually minimizes the energy usage?
If you're running a pharma environment, you need to make sure that you store your product in what we call an ambient temperature, which is between 15 degrees and 25 degrees. That has to be kept on that temperature 365 a day. So that does grab quite a lot of energy. Also on the humidity side, we need to manage our humidity within about 60%. Over and above that, our Meadowview site has one of the largest cold room in the country, probably in Africa. So that's a lot of cooling that happens throughout the process. You cannot switch it off.
We measure the electricity as one component of the energy consumption. And we say, all right, so for electricity, we need to make sure that we reduce it year on year by 8%.
So whereas we can reduce our electricity consumption, how can we reduce how that electricity is generated? 98%, 99% of it is non-renewable. That has to substantially change.
So when we initially put up the solar power, there was still a rule which said we are not allowed to produce more than 1 megawatt. That has since changed. So we're actually in a situation where we can run fully off the grid, especially during the day. So what we're looking at now is what can we do about storing that electricity and potentially to go 24 hours. One obvious, easy one to do is batteries. But what we're also seeing is that you actually need to look at a combination of energy sources. A lot of the buildings are old. They don't have LED lights in them. And that's the first thing that we actually do. So we convert it to LEDs. The LEDs give you let's call it a 40% saving, and then the solar will take you to a 50%.
The old one about lights and how to adjust the lighting to a certain lux level, how you design your facility to actually harvest the external lights as well. So it's possible in some environments, not possible in the pharmaceutical one because of direct sunlight.
We've got a unique challenge whereby we have a dark warehouse in a sense that we can't use natural light. So which means everything inside must be used via normal light.
We looked at the DALI system for the lighting control, which determines the amount of lux level and energy consumes with the LED light and dims and brightens itself up.
If the area is not in use for a certain time, the light goes off. But then as soon as somebody comes in that particular aisle on that space to use something, it comes on for that area using a motion sensor detectors. We actually offer a service where we store on behalf of our clients, which means then we receive the orders, we pick and pack and deliver. That automatically says we're using quite a lot of packaging to service the customers.
So we've got a global drive now that we're looking at specifically shrink wrap. You get machines that pre-stretches it, and it really takes to about a third or a quarter of the plastic that you're actually using. Then I want to go further and say, well, can we take that third that we're still using and actually use recycled plastic? And then the last one is, how do you totally eliminate it? And there's alternatives. We've set a target for ourselves in South Africa that we want to 90% recycled. And then in addition to that, we said that everyone must increase by 10% every year.
In Plumbago, as well as in Solar City, we've got boreholes. And what we do with the boreholes is that the treated water, let's go for the filtration plant, will go for consumption, human consumption, and the second one will go for the landscaping. And then thirdly, there is a possibility to use grey water as well.
The biggest thing that we're trying to do with water consumption is, given that we're in South Africa, use as little as possible. And then the second one, once we've brought it up, let's reuse it, in the park, in the facilities, in the gardens.
And also in our wash area, for our trucks, where you wash it, we capture that water again, we recycle it and reuse it to try and, as much as we can, not to use the clean water from the municipality.
We want to be in a carbon neutral situation, so we certainly not leaving a negative impact, but when we take it 2030 and beyond, we can flip it beyond that. So we are actually leaving the environment in a better place than it would have been did we not exist.
The culture needs to be established, but I believe it can be done. I think it's the future. I think it's the right thing, and it will leave a legacy for DSV, for our client supply chains, and of course for our kids and our kids' kids.
What we're doing now will make a difference. We're actually determining policy. and changing the industry.
It's that story of the starfish, right? When the person threw it back into the water, it made a difference for that starfish. It is changing that belief of no one else does it, and the impact of me recycling this little paper cup is so small. To, if I do this every day and I do it with everything I do and I influence people around me to do it, the groundswell is enormous. And it becomes the mainstream way of doing it, and not just because I think maybe I should do it. It's, I have to do it.